How are you?
So good. Here in New York.
You're in New York. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Who are you? What are you doing here?
Oh boy. Well, welcome to the Planeteer Capital headquarters out here in our lovely deck that's a little bit chilly sometimes in the springtime. I'm Sophie, and I started a venture fund called Planeteer Capital to invest as that first check into climate technology founders. So that's the simplest version of the story. And I've been nerding out and writing about this space and this topic for many years through a blog, which has kind of brought on a whole life of its own called Climate Tech VC, and track all of the data around where the capital flows through this climate and energy ever-evolving space, and did lots of pieces in and around the sustainable investing space previously, raised a bunch of money for a climate tech, or what we would now call a climate tech company. Mm-hmm. So this is really a culmination of my life's work. Nice. In lots of ways.
Awesome. And what is it? What excited you so much about climate tech? And even then moving from writing and doing research to make a step and say there's an opportunity for value creation.
Yeah, well, it's a big step to raise a fund. You're really kind of lashed to the mast, if you will, for forever for this thesis. It will continue to evolve around the edges over time, but I've always thought that there's a massive opportunity as climate changes the world around us for industries to adapt and evolve, not just from a risk mitigation perspective, but from capturing a lot of that upside, right? Yeah. So I think the change part of climate change is the piece that's really the most interesting to me, be it kind of physical risks, or be it supply chains ever kind of like evolving, be it new applications of AI, right, to these fundamental kind of industrial spaces. Yeah. Climate tech is a theme, not an industry.
Yeah, that's
and
true.
So it's a bit of a cop-out. It's like quite a large surface area to be investing across of, and wouldn't want to have it any other way, right? Like, we're doing this for many, many funds hopefully to come, and what was clean tech 1.0 is certainly not current day climate tech, and we've been investing out of this fund for just a few years so far, and we've seen that thesis evolve very dramatically even during that time period. So happy, I'm sure we'll get way more into what that thesis looks like, but the change part is what drives me.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, but maybe adding on what you just said, because obviously, like, I also have invested in climate tech since almost 4 years, and I started 2022. Really,
right.
And then we saw 2024, I think, was the peak of the market in sense, or around that. I mean, you have
Who knows? It kind of depends on how you cut the data, right?
Yeah, of course. It depends. But what I at least have seen in the market is that, at least in Europe, I think the amount of pre-seed deals done in climate tech are declining.
Yeah.
Obviously, everybody shifts to AI, which is an energy question in its core. And I'm curious to understand how you have evolved also on where do you see the opportunities are now in climate tech?
I'll hit that changing market point first. And so the numbers that we can chat about now are coming from this newsletter that I introduced called CTVC, or Climate Tech VC. Yeah. And then CTVC, many years ago, realized that our readers were often corporates or banks or government-involved players who were interested in more data on where is the capital flowing through the climate and energy ecosystem. Yeah. And so that birthed a market intelligence business, which is called Sightline. Yeah. And so Sightline data gets distributed through CTVC to our getting close to 100,000 subscribers. Wow. And so from that, we can now talk in extreme detail about how the market is moving. And then I'll weave in some perspectives from Planeteer's kind of like anecdotal perspective. Yeah. But you're right, the pre-seed and seed earliest stage deals have been declining in count and in total capital deployed into them over the past kind of 2 to 3 years or so. Yeah. It fluctuates like a little bit. There's been a year or two in there where it's kind of jumped back up. But on average, there are fewer folks that are starting new climate technology businesses over the last at least kind of like 24 months. And that is like pretty existential to the stages that you and I are investing in, right? So it's a bit funny because then anecdotally, when I'm busy every day in my inbox at Planeteer, it's easier than ever to start a new company. If the bar used to be, maybe just a warm intro or just an email landing in the inbox with a short blurb. Then it became that plus a demo, right? And that would get you really excited. Now it's like nice blurb plus demo plus product that works plus some early revenue from customers, and like only then are you really interested, because there's just, it's so much easier to start an on-ramp to build a new business. So even with that kind of landscape, the fact that there are not as many folks that are starting climate businesses is pretty existential. Though at the end of the day, right, like the kind of tough truth of the matter is, for funds like that we're investing out of, we're doing very concentrated bets into just a few founders. So we'll invest in less than 24 founders out of Planeteer's 54 million USD Fund 1. So that means we're really only looking for, you know, a few dozen amazing founders out there. And I feel very confident that like best of the best folks are still excited by that. Where's the most change happening, and what does energy have to do with it, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, long-winded way of saying less money going in earlier, much more money going into concentrated later stage positions where the market has somehow decided amongst itself that they're going to king make into a few businesses, which frankly I think are still uncertain and not really proven out. I don't think that's hugely unique to the climate or energy space. I think we see that across all sorts of funky dynamics happening with massive capital agglomerator style players. But as a boutique shop, it's a big question of like, how do we play in that concentrated dynamic?
Yeah, I mean, I think like exactly to your point, I think growth stage, it's very concentrated, actually increase even in the US market, capital flowing into growth stage climate tech, mostly driven by nuclear deals. And then other teams are completely off the market, right? And it's I think it's interesting for us to navigate through it as an early stage investor. And obviously Europe is very different than the US market. How do you think about that? Like, and especially maybe where are areas you are very driven about finding opportunities right now?
Yeah, you're spot on. It's pretty striking. Vast majority, I think it's about half or so of the money invested in 2025 into climate tech was going into nuclear or data center deals with things like geothermal and other like Trump administration darlings getting a real boost and a real tailwind. So like super reactive and like really stark of if you cut out just those small sectors from the many, many thousands that we're tracking as being involved in climate, which just kind of pull back a sec, that's everything from built environment through to food and agriculture, transportation, industrials, not just energy. Those sectors are getting a vast majority of the new money. And interestingly, lots of that money is coming from generalist funds. So these are folks that are doing fewer than 5 energy or climate deals per year. They didn't raise a thesis based off of climate, which again, I think is just this like response and reactivity generally to the boutique versus kind of like capital agglomerators space. But where does that leave us as a kind of thesis specialist? Keep in mind, we're like tip of the spear. So Planeteer is like first money in. So if something's already ripping and seen as kind of obvious and it's the next party play, it's well beyond our mandate. We're looking for where will the market be in 2 to 3 years reacting in that type of direction. So we're thinking a lot about, of course, things like next version of efficient compute. We're thinking a lot about insurance plays.
Like climate risk insurance?
Climate risk, and not just physical risk, honestly. It's like, what role does insurance have when there is so much change? Change seems to be the word of this chat. But when there's so much change happening in the market, be it from new market creation, be it from a need to underwrite volatility in general supply chain risks or bringing projects to market or offtake agreements, et cetera, et cetera. I think there's an interesting wedge and not much overlap in the Venn diagram of the climate and energy people and the insurance people really speaking a similar language. So we're trying to wedge ourselves in there. Our most recent investment is an explainable AI. So think not black box where you can't trace the logic of what's happening for mining. So the idea is superior resource estimation and then much more efficient from a time perspective, time to extraction for where you bore holes and how you extract resources for the energy transition from the ground. But that's a little bit contrarian in this market because we're backing a company that looks more like a SaaS style model, which hypothetically will vertically integrate in the future.
Yeah.
I think there's a massive amount of value to be had from helping large industrial businesses that aren't going anywhere anytime soon to adopt those style of like efficiency and planning plays.
And maybe a question also for the audience, founders especially who start their first fundraise now.
Yes.
What are you looking for into founders? How do you, like, I think we understand the thesis, but what is it beyond? As you do concentrated bets, what makes you lean in?
Yeah. We touched on this a little bit before of it's both easier than ever to kind of get started, but it's harder than ever to stand out.
Of course.
I'm trying to think about how dramatically different this is from how I would have answered this question previously. I think the like velocity of learning and commercial applicability is higher than ever. What I mean by that is not only can you pilot something, but you need to be able to like incredibly intimately understand the adoption profile of your customer. We tend to skew pretty B2B and pretty enterprise. And so those customers are overwhelmed with a flurry of supposed AI, solutions for their woes. We like backing founders who've often been inside that seat before or are like intimately connected with that buyer persona so that they're able to integrate and implement way faster than the next kind of whiz out of YC perhaps. So example of that would be we've backed the folks who previously ran Mosaic, which is a $15 billion, solar financing play, and they're out to market with a clever capability to help accelerate the financing of novel clean energy projects. So if you're a developer, you might work with Ezra in order to speed up access to capital. If you're someone deploying projects, so maybe you're a big battery developer, you'd work with Ezra to find folks that want to back those style projects. That type of marketplace means you have to get adoption from obviously like both sides, and the Ezra team has been on both sides of that table, and they're also just product whizzes. So their speed to pilot and try and build is like really exponential. So we look for that as well as the deep kind of customer understanding, and then folks that are far out ahead of where the obvious white hot space is at the moment. So we're willing to take some bets in things like biosurveillance.
Big topic. I hear this also in folks like Europe. I recently everybody's talking about virus.
Totally. I mean, it's just risk, right? Like everything's weirder and changing faster.
So weird.
How do you manage?
So weird.
Yeah, so we like the weirdness and the wackiness. We're doing a bunch in powered land, lots of these kind of like brokerage plus style marketplaces. It's exciting times, honestly.
Yeah, it's super exciting.
So folks that can build super fast, who are not held back by customer access and making the most of the ability to just ship.
Nice. And last two questions. First on, obviously, you're based in New York, spent a lot of time in San Francisco, but also I know you're from Europe, running around in Europe.
Secretly.
I think I met you in Paris. So you also like Europe or are interested in European founders. I'm curious to, I see both. I see obviously US funds opening up office in Zurich, which is very hyped now, Munich, London, of course. But on the other side, when I was here in New York, a lot of people told me they're actually not really bullish on Europe. Talent is here, more money and so on. How do you see this from a climate perspective?
This is a classic question, right? Of like you can bifurcate by like sector or by geography or by stage or whatnot. As a solo investor at the fund, I can only be in so many places at once. But with the distribution of the newsletter and whatnot, I try to be everywhere. Or it's like Hermione with her time turner. I try to be in all places at once. Lots of coffee. How am I thinking about that? We really do not tend to do a lot of this kind of regulatory arbitrage style work. what are we spending more time on from a European perspective? I think a lot of the like next generation of DERs and distributed grid and billing and some of the insurance applications, honestly, are probably like slightly stronger founder persona. Otherwise, when we're talking about like, we have a team for Sightline, which is predominantly based in London.
Okay.
And we've backed out of Planeteer 2 teams that are based out of London. So that's probably the closest that we've gotten so far, but just like, it's the basic stuff of extraordinarily strong technical talent, often coming out of university, that's like in the city and easy to build like a young, high hustle team around it, but with ambitions to expand rapidly, kind of like beyond the UK market. So those tend to be a bit of the like live in multiple places at once, which perhaps is a bias that I'm bringing since we tend to live that way as well. So super open and excited and out there every other month or so. But each European country also acts as a very different market in and of itself. So it's kind of tough to generalize. I suppose we've looked at some geospatial applications. Insurance, same stuff I've just been saying. Let me know when you crack that nut of
I will. I mean, I try to understand US, which is very difficult for me right now. Last question, where do we find you this year? Where can we meet you?
Gosh, where are we going to be? Let's see. Mostly trying to soak up the sun here. Hopefully we can take our thick jackets off in a month or two, hopefully. But mostly in New York. I'm out in San Francisco every other week. I'm going to get to be in Europe for most of April, actually. So hanging out with lots of our co-investors, be in Bilbao for Energy Tech Summit, and then flying directly back to San Francisco for SF Climate Week, which is always nice when everybody kind of gets together and does a bit of a sense check halfway-ish through the year of what's interesting. And then our year, frankly, kind of like crescendos in September around New York Climate Week, when everybody comes to our hometown. And so that's really like a pinnacle for us. But otherwise, you can find me online all the time. So in your inbox with CTVC. And then we're nerdily and enthusiastic on LinkedIn quite a bit. So I can't believe I'm saying find me on LinkedIn, but maybe LinkedIn is like the new social.
Super. Thank you. It was great having you. And have some questions. So reach out to Sophie if you're raising. And